The International Association for Near-Death Studies presents NDE Radio, a weekly exploration of near-death experiences and similar encounters with the other side. Now, here's your host, Lee Witting.
Welcome to NDE Radio, brought to you by IANDS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies. I'm your host, Lee Witting. It may sound trite, but it's so true that we learn not from the comfortable events in our lives, but from the disappointments, the losses, the struggles, and the emergencies. Those are the motivators that drive us to ask the important questions and lead us to undertake the difficult quests. And our guest today, Claudia Watts Edge, is an excellent example of how those motivators can work together to teach us. Her happy childhood suddenly fell apart at age 16 when her beloved father was killed in a work-related accident. And after a year and a half of depression and grieving, her father's death served as a catalyst, creating a deep thirst for answers. And this led her in the 1970s to Raymond Moody's writings about NDEs. The search was further heightened when Claudia had a profound near-death experience in 1984, when she and her newborn baby girl died together in a placenta-related disaster. Her journey into fully understanding her NDE took over 30 years to surface, and as a result, she's written 2 books exploring the spiritual mysteries of the other side through her memories and dreams, called Gifts from the Edge, Stories of the Other Side, and Gifts from the Edge, Volume 2, Lessons from the Other Side. Claudia lives in Utah, where she volunteers as a hospice worker. Claudia, welcome to NDE Radio.
Thank you very much. I'm so pleased to be here. Thank you for a great intro.
It's wonderful to have you. Claudia, the detailed account of you and your daughter's dying and then surviving, and the gifts you received upon coming back, took years for you to fine-tune. But through your journal dream sessions, your books share detailed accounts of your spirit school teachings and visions. So if you would, well, first let's begin with your birth emergency in 1984. And what you experienced in your NDE.
Well, it started out pretty normal. This was my 5th and last baby, and I was full term and ready to go. And like you say, in moments, your life can change from happiness to the term you used, disaster. I was at the hospital. I followed intuition to be there, and something indeed did happen, and I started to bleed out very quickly. I was told that even if I had been en route to the hospital, I wouldn't have made it. By the time they got a doctor into the room, he expressed that I had 2 minutes of blood left before I was to die, and I absolutely no pain was involved at the time, and I was pondering the fact that, wow, so this is how it all ends. It was kind of quite a concept for me to grasp.
Wow.
So I did not have any kind of anesthesia. I was, the intern had a scalpel, and they did an emergency C-section in the examination room.
Without anesthesia.
Without anesthesia.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It wasn't until the point that I noticed the nurse holding this gray rope in her arms, yards and yards of gray rope, that I realized it was my intestines. And boy, I mean, the pain set in. That was pain that had no kind of verbal expression other than wanting to scream and run away.
Wow.
So it was an intense situation. They could not get a heartbeat on my daughter. I didn't know it was my daughter. It was in 84, and that was before everyone had that 3 or 4 month visit that they get to have a reveal party and know if it's going to be a boy or girl. I had no idea. And but I was concerned because I had heard them say that they could not get a heartbeat on the baby. And during the procedure, I heard that she was gone. It just, the disaster part of it took over in my mind. I was losing my vision. My hearing was becoming very acute. I could hear everything in the hospital, but I could hardly see anything. And I kept looking up to make sure the lights were on, and they were, but the sides of the room were becoming fluid. The ceiling had lifted on the room, and what I was experiencing was a formation of a tunnel. I was like, oh, I was very aware in having heard NDE stories that, oh, a lot of people experience a tunnel. And so here come these walls closer and closer. And I thought, well, this is the tunnel. It was kind of interesting interesting the thoughts that go through your head in those times, but that was one of them. And I felt this tugging from behind, and at the hearing that my daughter was no longer with us, I very easily, and I wanted to express how I just popped out of my body. Yes, I had been in pain earlier, but the experience of dying was kind of a no big deal. There was a soft pop, and it was kind of like the pop, as a child's, those pop gun toys. You put the little ball in and you squeeze it, and the air pushes the ball out, and there's a pop.
Mm-hmm.
That's a kind of how I would describe my death. Actually, is very, very soft that way. And I found myself looking at my body, and everything was quite gruesome, and I was extremely tired of it, detached from it, because I was still me. What I was looking at is a gruesome scene that I just decided to leave, and started to float away and kind of experience. I had heard some music as I popped out of my body, and I could hear it very clearly. It was the MASH theme, which was kind of crazy.
It is. It begins, "Suicide is painless."
Exactly.
It brings on many changes, as I
There
recall.
you go. Da 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 da. Yeah, and I could hear it, and I had focused on it, trying to keep my heart from beating, all of the blood out of my body. It was going out faster, than I just thought if I calmed down and if I calmed my heart down. So I listened to the music, and after I popped out of my body, I decided to go look for it. And so I was very aware of the fact that I had this new ability to float. It was pretty cool. And I was following the music. I ended up in a gentleman's room who was kind of half asleep, kind of in and out of sleep, with the television playing, and I was kind of watching the program with him for a few moments, but when I could tell that he had no concept that I was there with him, it dawned on me, oh my goodness, I'm dead. He has no idea that I'm here with him. So as soon as I heard that, I went into a place of, it was black. It was a soothing nothingness. A void is not a proper term, because to me that equates nothing. And this was absolutely beautiful and alive. It was a living thing that held me and kept me comfortable and comforted, and I felt swaddled like a baby. I was in a very safe place, and I don't know how long I was there, but the comfort of it is something that you just aim to want to return to one day.
When you told me about this the other day, I couldn't help but think, and I've been trying to relate how this might be ever since. What you're describing is a womb.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
You're describing a dark, warm place that's hugging you and loving you. And I thought, that's the womb.
Wow.
And then I thought, I wonder if you took your dead daughter's soul in with you and you just weren't aware of it. But to comfort her, you created a spiritual womb was possibly created for the two of you.
Wow. That's such a beautiful thought, Lee. I'm gonna hang on to that one for a while. Because I have been asked, what happened with your daughter? She's with me now. She was revived, and she's a beautiful young woman. She's just given me little 4-year-old twin grandbabies, and she turned out fine. But we were in the arms of disaster for sure, and how we both came out of it unscathed and fairly normal, I guess. Um, that's a miraculous event right there, and so I love that terminology. I think I'm going to hang on to that.
Well, that's what it sounded like to me. Then I guess you heard a voice calling
I
Claudia?
did. I heard this most irritating noise, and it was it was calling me by name, and it didn't fit in the wonderful place that I was at. And I I just kind of squirmed and just wanted to crawl in closer and tighter to my being held, but it just wouldn't go away. And it was calling Claudia, Claudia, come back, come back. And after ignoring it for a while, I did hear her say, your baby is alive and she needs you. And I had enough wherewithal to answer back to try and make this noise go away. I said, no, my baby's gone and, I'm staying here. But at the time that I answered, I immediately was back into my body. So,
Wow.
so kind of like, oh, darn, well, here we are. Um, and I had become famous within the hospital. It was a teaching hospital, and I had a number of doctors and nurses and a number of people stopping in. They called me the Pioneer Woman, was my title while I was there, and I was there for an extended time, just trying to rebuild blood and whatnot. My baby even got to go home before I did. Went through hysterectomies and all kinds of fun things. But they would come in the room and ask me, what it had felt like. They wanted to know what I could not come up with the words for that intense of pain. And then they would ask me, and it was funny that they used the terminology because I was aware that I had died, but the hospital was also aware, and they were actually speaking, especially for 1984, quite openly about the fact that I had passed and that they had brought me back. And so, but they would ask me, where did I go, or did I see anything? And I had a very hard time answering that question. Again, two questions that were very hard to answer. And they would just kind of equate it to trauma and just kind of leave me alone. And it allowed me to push this experience further down, deep down inside of myself, because it was not an experience that I had read in any of my searching through, this NDE material and the beautiful stories of, meeting loved ones and going to a beautiful, green or flower or creeks or whatever environment of calm and peaceful. I was calm and peaceful, but I saw nothing. And I felt an anticipation from my own mother of, not being able to bring back a story of seeing my father, that I'd seen him smile and, got to hug him or whatever and got to bring back a wonderful message. And so nobody talked about it because I stopped talking about it. Everyone else did. And, an experience like that, it will raise its head one day. You just can't push it down long enough. And, but it took 30 years of continued researching for me to really start having, the kind of wonderful dreams and things that I was starting to have, and I had asked for them, but apparently I had not been ready. I had actually asked in kind of an anger one time, I know there was something more that happened to me, and why haven't I been able to remember it? And the voice asked me, what did it prompt? So I was I said, hey, I've been doing my homework here.
Well,
And
I think you said that along with being disappointed at not having seen your dad, you wound up at an IANDS conference as a result of watching a I Survived Beyond and Back show and meeting a friend.
Meeting a friend, yeah.
Tell us about that.
Well, the IANDS conference is a wonderful opportunity to meet so many wonderful like minds, and I had honestly at that point had was not familiar with it, and I watched a wonderful program called I Survived Beyond and Back, where I was so enthralled in the story from Dee DeWitt Maltby. I knew I had to find her. She was in Colorado, and I was in Colorado, and I ended up finding her. There wasn't a whole lot of information other than she owned an antique store, so I went to every antique store in Colorado looking for her. That's the drive. That's
Yes.
that's the quest. The other side gives you that. You just want more, and I really believed her story. Right, just down to my bones that she had seen God, and I wanted to know more about her story. And she brought me to this IANDS conference, and it was the most loving, beautiful place to be with the most beautiful souls, all sharing their stories, and the talks were wonderful. The hallway visits were wonderful.
Mhm.
It was a beautiful thing, and because she knew a lot of these NDE speakers from the program, she would introduce me, or we would have lunch or dinner together. And one of the guests was Eben. I'm sorry.
Yes. Eben Alexander.
Yeah,
Yes. I was
Eben
at that
Alexander.
conference. I remember it well.
Oh my
It was a
goodness! Wow.
wonderful conference. But you had lunch with Eben Alexander,
Yeah.
and you talked a little about how you would like to have designed your NDEs had you had the opportunity.
Well, and I was with a group, so I wasn't just alone there. But it was before Eben's book came out, and he was still getting all kinds of wonderful experiences that he hadn't even been able to share on the program. It was still growing. It was still you still just get so many downloads and memories. It continues. But he shared that if he had been able to design his own NDE, he would have seen his father. His father was a doctor. I'm probably a surgeon, just
He was
like.
a Yes, he was. Yeah.
And he because they were so close, he couldn't imagine that he hadn't seen his father. And the depth of his experience is miraculous and beautiful. And it's so worth the read or listening to his talks. But at the time he was still doing a lot of when he wrote his book.
Mhm.
So his expression of not being able to see his father just opened me up. It was like a door opened that it was okay. Here's this, beautiful story that this gentleman has. And although it was different from mine, that was very similar. And I felt a door open, and the memories did start to come in. I had asked really fervently, and said, I'm ready. And I don't know how much longer that you guys are going to wait, but give it to me. And the dreams did start coming.
Okay, well, now we still have some time to hear about what you've learned from what you call your spirit school. But
Yeah.
tell us how your guide appeared, because it sounds you described him as Mrs. Doubtfire
Oh
and
my goodness, yes.
and the Texaco man. So,
One day he was the whirling dervish. He was all in red with this skirt that was flowing, and he turned and turned and turned and had this kind of tall dunce looking hat on, all in red. And I'm having this regular dream, and in the corner of the dream is this crazy movement, and around and around. And so my attention left the dream and to him, and he held up this sign that said, pay attention to this. And as the dream kind of morphed into other things, and so many different experiences from what I call spirit school, because I would find myself in a classroom. Sometimes it was out in nature, but a lot of times it was in a classroom setting. And I knew there were other students there, but I don't remember them, or, I don't have a memory of faces. But I knew that my guide was with me. And I also, I was so the teacher was so patient and so wonderful, because school had not been one of my favorite things. I was very social, and the schoolwork was not important to me as the social schooling was. And so when I found myself in spirit school, I had an absolutely different attitude toward it, because I was getting a new piece, a new memory, or a new piece of the spiritual puzzle. And so and my teacher would look me in the eye, almost like a one-on-one, but he was excited everything that I was grasping. It was a thrill to him that that I was understanding the concepts that were being presented. So this one story of a spirit school I thought about sharing, because they all came with headings, just like, writing on the blackboard, today we are going to learn, and this heading was the layering descriptions and explanations. And we all have that question, why are we here? What is our purpose? And or why are we veiled? We've heard about the veil and we don't remember. And I have a lot of great stories that address that. But to go into it just a little bit deeper is, when we ask, we ask these questions, what is it like on the other side? And we have these beautiful experiences that come back and are explored through IANDS and many other programs. Your program, what a wonderful asset to the world to share these things. But so when I was asking, what is it? What are we here for? And all of that, and what is the big purpose, the big picture? And it was explained by my teacher pushing a pillow at me. It was this crazy. If you were around in the early 60s, this decor pillow on many couches, at least in my neighborhood, I remember seeing them in quite a few living rooms. It was a kind of a translucent material. It was light brown. There was a little round thing with little dotted Swiss. Sorry. This fabric was kind of punched into the pillow, these little dots, little pink fuzzy dots all over this brown translucent material. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that they would choose something like that. And he says, describe this to me. And, we learn by example. That's our best, way to be taught. And I was holding this thing trying to, it's brown and it's round. And he says, no, I want you to go deeper. I want you to let's explore. And how do you describe this pillow without, using words like this? Pretend I have no idea what material is and whatnot. And, that became really, really difficult. And I started looking at this translucent color, and I thought of an onion. It's how the outside of the onion takes on this kind of brownish color, and it is a little bit translucent, but it does hold color. And he had turned away from me as I was thinking of this onion. He was with another student, and a lot of our speaking back and forth was actual speaking, but there was also parts where he knew what I was thinking, because his back was turned to me when I started to think about describing it as an onion, and he turned right around. And he said, I want you to think about if you were on the phone with Jesse. Jesse is my son that I can share spiritual concepts with. We can talk for hours. He's been very supportive in my journey. But he said, I want you, and he used his name. He says, I want you to pretend like you're talking to Jesse over the telephone. And then he went into this rant, and I'm just going to read it really crazy fast. But it says, but now at trying to describe an onion, its many layers, its pungent color, the feel of it, firm yet wet, then describe the color from here, then describe the pillow and the polka dots and the entirely different texture that doesn't match or fit the translucency or the texture, then explain the tiny hardball dots of fabric that are fuzzy to the touch, then go on and on trying to describe a pillow to someone who isn't familiar with fabrics or the era when this cloth was popular. And we haven't even touched on the description of the color of the pink dots yet. And then he went, as he had thrown out this verbiage at me. And it was so funny, silly, and to the point, and I got it. I got in his trying to illustrate frustration to explain to, our limited human minds just cannot conceive of this hugest of concepts to be shown us. And so what we're given are layers. My explanation of the onion is a lot how we are taught on this side. It's definitely been for me in an actual school setting, but it can come to us in dreams. We may have an entirely different type of dream, or it might come in a life lesson. But whatever layer to the puzzle that we are working on, it'll come to us, and it has to come in layers. And our guides and our teachers on the other side are excitedly watching for that light bulb to go on. Oh, they got it, and they can build upon that initial concept. We can now go to step 2. We can now go to step 3, and it's a desire to want to take those steps. It's people will ask me, is it okay? Because I don't really care. When I die, I die, blah, blah. And of course it is. But there are many of us that have had experiences or just, this quest to want to know more. And so I thought that was an interesting, way that they would talk about this layering of concepts so that we would get it.
Are all of the lessons taught with examples like that? That's
Yes.
Almost like Jesus' parables.
Thank you. I appreciate that, because that's how they are presented. I will even get a subtitle that say metaphor or parable, and remind me that I'm receiving stories, not exactly how things are on the other side, but because I'm very vocal in sharing, I'm given the concept in a story form. And that's how I wrote my books, is if this is a act of service, I will give the dreams that were about service or about letting go of fear, or and those are my chapter headings. And then I give the dreams as they are presented, because they are lessons from the other side. They are tools to teach us by a simple story form.
Mm. Wow. Well, Claudia, we are just about out of time for today, but tell the listening audience how they can find your books and your website.
Terrific. I'm on Amazon. You can find me at Barnes and Nobles and other places. I did have one thing, if we have like 2 minutes, I could share.
Go ahead.
Because I wanted to talk, because I talked about Spirit School, I did want to share a memory of my NDE, and it was in a translucent bubble, I guess I want to call it, or a sphere. I could see out of it, and I knew that my guide was beside me at the time. But I wanted to leave you with this huge aha, because it's still something that I contemplate. I was riding in this bubble through the universe, through the stars. They were passing. We were quickly moving through the universe, and as we approached each star, I could hear it. It had a consciousness, and it had a voice, and it was calling my name. It was welcoming me. I was somewhere back where I belonged, and how was my trip, and it's so great to see you. And as one star would stop, we'd get farther from it, and the next one coming up, I could hear the vibration and the joy and love coming from all of them. But at each star that I approached closely, I could hear it naming me. It knew me in an intimate way. It knew who I was and loved me beyond measure, every star that we approached. So I wanted to leave this aha, something to think about. It was quite an unusual experience, and I'm glad for the dreams as they come to me, the memories that come to me. And I don't know how many more books are in there. I'm just writing them down as they come. But
That's great. One last thing I wanted to say to you was what a blessing it is to have a son you can talk to about these things.
oh my goodness, yes. And I love my family, but it's been kind of a lonely venture, to be kind of the oddball of the family.
It often is for people who've had these experiences.
Yeah, yeah. And though no one has outright, been offended by what I have to say or anything, I get a lot of shaking heads and whatnot. But I do appreciate my Jesse that will, he'll just call and say, I thought of this, or I dreamed this, or what do you think about that? And man, we can dig deep. We call them our dig deep phone calls. So
Wonderful.
I felt like we did some digging the other day too, Lee. I appreciate you. I appreciate your work, and I appreciate the IANDS family. It is a wonderful organization, and
oh yes, tell us about you're going to moderate a panel.
Oh yeah. I'm excited to be moderating a panel in August. I believe it's the 16th. It's a Saturday. And I will be with two gentlemen, Pat Johnson and Chris Kido. And we will be speaking about, kind of the after effects of our NDEs. And I know all three of us wish we had, an hour apiece. It's a way to get to know us a little bit, and with COVID thing going around, I was really excited to host a lot of people in my hometown. It was going to be in Salt Lake City, and that was not to be with COVID, but I think it will still be a wonderful conference.
Yes, I think it will be. It won't be the same, but it should be really exceptional. And for listeners that want to find out more about that, they should go to the IANDS.org website and sign up, because it's going to be, I think, a really excellent experience. You'll learn a lot. Claudia, we're out of time, I'm afraid. Thanks so much for being on the show. And I'll just tell the listeners to tune in again next Monday, 11 a.m. Eastern, for more NDE Radio. And this is Lee Witting saying thanks for listening.
Thank you.